And good morning. It is 21 minutes after 7 o'clock, and joining us on the phone this morning is State Representative representing District 59, Greg Nibert with us. Good morning, Greg. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning, Mike. I certainly can.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for spending some time with us on the phone here. Of course, Representative Nibert will be heading to Santa Fe here later on today to get ready for the upcoming legislative session. If you don't mind, before we kind of talk a little bit about, what you anticipate and all that, for folks that are either, new to New Mexico or don't really understand how our legislative session works. For folks that don't know, we do every year the legislature meets. They meet for a 30-day session, and every other year, and then the year in between, they meet for a 60-day session. This year, they'll be going for a 30-day. If you don't mind, just kind of give a quick, just short description of the difference between the 30-day and the 60-day in terms of what you guys work on and things like that. It's a little bit different in the two sessions. If you don't mind, just kind of explain that for folks.
Well, in New Mexico, our Constitution sets forth the times that the legislature is required to meet, and we are to meet on the third Tuesday of January each year. In odd-numbered years, we're to meet in a 60-day session where the legislature has a blank slate. In other words, we can introduce any pieces of legislation that we deem to be beneficial to the people of the state, and the agenda is set by the legislature themselves.
Gotcha.
In the even-numbered years, the Constitution provides for a 30-day session as opposed to a 60-day session. It is limited in scope to revenue items and items that the governor believes needs to be addressed in the state of New Mexico. So the governor has a big hand in setting the agenda for the 30-day session.
Gotcha.
And so for a piece of legislation to be introduced or to at least get assigned to a committee, it has to either deal with the basically the budget,
mm-hmm.
or it has to receive a message from the governor's office to be deemed germane. Now, there are some things that go on that deal with that a little bit. The rules of the Senate and the House leave it up to the House and the Senate to deem bills germane if they so wish.
Okay.
But generally, you have to have a message from the governor to get a non-revenue item on and assigned to a committee.
Okay.
In an even-numbered year.
So during the 30-day in the even number year, the budget, the finance stuff, does that take precedent over the governor's demand? Like for instance, as we get toward the end of the 30-day, if the budget's not approved, does that put some of the governor's agenda on the back burner before? Or, I mean, like in essence, you really have to have a budget before the 30 days are over. Some of the governor's requests may not be as necessary there. Is that the case, or am I way off there?
That would largely be the case, and that's certainly the case every year. One of the things that we do have to do as a legislative body is to pass a budget for the functioning of state government.
Mm-hmm.
If we do not pass a budget, then unlike the federal government that has these continuing resolutions, we could not continue on because government would not be funded.
Right.
In fact, that very issue was somewhat dealt with a month ago when the courts demanded that the governor bring all the federal dollars through the legislative process
mm-hmm.
and not did not allow her to independently spend those funds without legislative action, and that was a victory for the legislative body when the court confirmed that issue. So
Sure.
the budget's something that we, as the legislative branch of government, have to weigh in on. We have to pass a budget in order for the state to continue to function as a governmental entity.
I did get a chance to over the weekend to see in the news some of the things the governor wants the legislative body to address. A lot of it dealing with teachers, education. Some of your thoughts there. I mean, yeah, I see what she like her. I don't know if it's a wish list or saying this is what you need to do or however you want to call that. On paper, some of it seems very nice. Yeah, sure, I'd love to be able to do this, but in reality, what as a legislative body, do you think some of the things she's asking for are feasible, or are they a little over the top?
Well, I think some of them will probably get pared down through the legislative process, but I think her major items that she put at the very top of the list, the pay increases for public education.
Hmm.
I suspect that will get legs. Probably already has gotten legs. I'm kind of down here by myself because both Representatives Anderson and Zell are on House Appropriations, and they started meeting last week. They've
Oh,
been up
okay.
there
So they had to go
all
up
week.
early.
Yeah, they've been up there for a week dealing with the budget already. So I suspect that a lot of the things that the governor has said are her priority have already been brought before that committee, and I, in talking to my colleagues, it looks like some of those things are going to be get through that process.
Sure.
Some of the other things I think face a steeper slope and probably don't get as much traction, but that's part of the legislative process.
Sure. Well, and it's like anything else. The things that move the needle and get people excited or upset, those are going to be the things that get covered more and get a little more spotlight on it, just because they draw more attention. And let's face it, for people running for approval of people, they're going to want to do the things that make them. You know what I'm saying? It's so there's certain aspects that are going to get more attention or sexier because of the nature of what they are, than others that you just don't really hear much about. And so sometimes if something is in the forefront, they're going to move harder to get that done than something that doesn't get so much of the media attention. Is that a fair statement?
It is, and as you've noticed, Mike, you've seen the news. You can see what her top priorities are because she's been on television the last few nights advocating for those what I consider critical measures that she thinks are at the top of the list.
Yeah.
We first heard about public education pay raises. We've heard the last couple of days about crime and violent offenders. That's certainly going to be on the message.
Yeah.
It's a little frustrating for those of us in southeast New Mexico because we've been trumpeting some of those concerns for as long as I've been in the legislature.
Sure.
That criminal justice reform meant something different than what my colleagues on the majority side deemed to be criminal justice reform, and that was let them go, let them out. And now they've finally figured out that maybe that's not a good policy and that it has dire consequences. So we're hearing that.
So does that give you some optimism a little bit that maybe some of the legislation that, like you said, you and your your kind of constituents here in Southeast New Mexico have been saying for a while? Is it pandering or is it some kind of, all right, finally they're seeing what we're seeing?
Oh, I think it's it's disappointing that we've had to go through so many years of pain to get to this point. because a lot of people have been really hurt.
Sure.
But on the other hand, moving forward, I'm pleased to see that they're finally understanding that there has to be some consequences to evil actions in
Sure.
society,
Let
and so increasing the statute of limitations on second degree murder, increasing sentences for those really violent crimes
mhm.
are something that we've been advocating for a long time.
So can I ask, like when she's talking about, like, for instance, pay increases and things for education and all that. I mean, yes, we all would love to pay teachers more. We all, but I mean, there's a finite amount of money out there to spend. That's why we have budgets and everything. If they're going to put a hard press to make sure teachers, which I'm great with, don't say I'm complaining because I'm not, but I understand also that if you put more money in one place, the money's got to come from somewhere else to fix that. Um, so if the legislature goes through and passes some of the stuff she's talking about, does that mean that there's going to be less pork money spent, or or more seriously funded things going to take a hit here, you think?
Well, we're in a very interesting time. We've had some serious challenges with respect to COVID and the shutdown
Mhm.
of businesses, people being unemployed, tremendous amounts of money going to unemployment and stuff. But yet we find ourselves in a very good financial position as a state. In fact, this year's budget is proposed at $8.3 billion, which is significantly above the $7.4 billion budget last year. That's a huge increase in monies. Now, some of that may be federal dollars coming in, but we've also had very strong economic activity, and I don't need to remind you, a lot of that's a result of what's occurring down here in southeast New Mexico with respect to oil and gas production.
Right.
So we have strong revenues. We have a good year for revenues, and the concern that the southeast New Mexico legislators always warn the folks up north about is the oil and gas industry, it goes up and it's really nice, and it comes down and it's really bad, and so don't get really
Excited.
crazy on spending
Mhm.
when your basis is a very cyclical type of commodity
Sure.
that goes up and down pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and so I think there's some things that we can do and ought to do, but again, as you know, my focus has always been take this largesse and put it toward infrastructure that oftentimes gets neglected, because if we have some extra money, deal with those needs that when they're repaired, they last for 25, 30, 50 years,
Sure.
and you get some bang for your buck for the long term. If we just simply take all that money and put it toward recurring expenses, then we get in trouble down the road,
Yeah.
because we'll have to have those dollars whether it's good times or bad times. So I hope, and I see in some of her statements that she does want to do some of that infrastructure spending as well. I just hope that the increase in recurring obligations is not getting way out of hand, that it's going to obligate the legislature 5 years from now from having a $8.3 billion budget, because we may not have those revenues as production declines, as the
Sure.
price of oil goes lower, what have you.
Yeah. Well, that's been an age old debate in New Mexico. You've always had, all right, it's good this time, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good a year from now. Let's say for the rainy day versus the ideology of, no, we got a bunch of money now, let's spend it all while we still can. And then, that's kind of the big ideological difference between, conservative and liberal in New Mexico for a long time. And the oil and gas has kind of been that measuring stick a little bit on what to do with that funds, and see that I don't think that ever will change. Will it?
Probably not. But, we see it a lot more drastically in southeast New Mexico than the rest of the state. I mean, we see real effects of a very cyclical commodity, oil and gas. We've seen it as recently as the last couple of years.
Sure.
Hobbs and Carlsbad, right before the census, they were really blowing and going and had a lot more people. The census came out, and frankly, I think both communities were rather disappointed in the numbers, because they knew from water usage and everything else that they had much greater population as early as 2 months before the census. But the price of oil dropped, COVID hit, and all that stuff was going on, and a lot of those folks went back, quote, home, close quote, to where they came from, and they weren't counted in the New Mexico numbers. And so we see dramatically how the price of oil and how the demand for oil affects not only the money coming into the state, but we see how it affects our communities,
Sure.
how it affects our neighborhoods, how it affects our schools and everything else. And we see it firsthand here.
Well, it's hard for, even sustained growth for communities like that. I mean, just talking, not even so much population, but with the commercial and encouraging other entities to come to New Mexico. If you have a very volatile population like we see in some of our oil and gas communities, where one minute there's 100,000 people there, a year from now it could be 15,000. It's just the nature of oil and gas. But that's got to also hurt the other side too, because you look at, like you said, the census numbers. The commercial businesses and companies and things are saying, hey, are we going to move to New Mexico? Well, let's look at the number of people and things. And if that's all over the place or not consistent, they're not going to want to set up shop either. So it is a huge trickle down effect on some of that stuff too. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there.
That's true.
Getting back to the crime thing real quick. Now, like you said, the governor over the last couple of days has been in the news, in the media, proposing heavy about, kind of cracking down on crime during this legislative session. Are you going to see a lot of support, you think, from the other side in the House or in the legislature? I think, especially we've looked over the last couple of years, and there is a heavy percentage of quote unquote progressives in the legislature, and the talk of defund the police and all that kind of nonsense. Is there going to be some resistance to some of the governor's measures here from the other side, or are you going to see people work in concert with what basically some of the stuff you and your constituents have been saying for years here?
That's somewhat of an unknown. I saw Senator Cervantes, who's chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, questioning whether or not he is fully supportive of some of those measures.
Yeah.
I know the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Gail Chasey from Albuquerque, she is generally fairly hesitant about increasing penalties for crimes. And so it'll be interesting to see how much support the governor gets on those measures. I do think at the end of the day, a lot of those measures do get some traction. They may not get 100% traction, but I suspect that there will be significant momentum behind some of those measures to get the issue not only debated but get them passed. The issue would be whether you get an extra 10 years or 5 years or 15 years. What's going to be the increase in the penalty? How long is the second-degree murder statute of limitations? Is it the current 6 years, or is it going to be basically the same as first-degree murder, unlimited, or is it somewhere in between? I suspect that it's going to be somewhere in between.
Gotcha.
Because in New Mexico, nobody really gets tried for first-degree murder
Yeah.
anymore. It's all second-degree murder, and even if they found the person that killed all the women who were found on the West Mesa of Albuquerque, that person would go scot-free, because
Yeah.
it would be virtually impossible to show premeditation, 30, 40 years later. So
Yeah.
those things would all be, that person would go scot-free because the statute of limitations is run. And
Sure.
that's not what I think New Mexico needs. And so I'm glad the governor's picking up on that.
Sure. I just hope that, and this is where maybe some of the problems, run deeper. We can still make all the requirements we want on our judicial system, but if they don't have the money and support, the number of judges they need, the number of courts, the dockets cleared. I mean, that's part of the dockets have been a mess forever, and there's huge delays and things. And, yes, want to be, tough on crime, things like that. But at the same time, if there's no support system to actually execute the laws and things you're making, what good are they sometimes too? So I'm all for doing that, but I also, my opinion is one of those things that's great, but we also need to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to handle these criminals and make sure that they don't get out on technicalities or get out because there's no room for them, or you know what I mean? Just some of the side problems that we see in New Mexico.
Yeah, we have a huge problem today with the lack of officers on the street.
Mm-hmm.
They can't. They did a program last night on TV that so many of these street racers in Albuquerque are not being prosecuted because the police officer didn't show up at the hearing and the case was dismissed.
Yeah,
and
it's a real problem.
You have to have a sufficient police force to be able to allow those officers the time to go to court and to testify. And if they're out and held up from going to court because they're having to cover for lack of personnel generally,
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of stuff for naught, because those folks get off scot-free without having to address the danger they cause society. So it's a catch-22 in many ways. So the governor's proposal is to try to train more officers, and
Good.
that's a lofty goal. But I would also add, you have to create the environment
Absolutely.
that police officers, or that people want to become police officers. And it's awfully difficult to say, well, we're going to pay you X amount of money, but, oh, by the way, we're going to also look over your shoulder and question your every move, and
not back your play here.
Vilify you for every action you take. We have to come to terms with, we need our police officers to feel that they are respected and that the population supports them, because
Absolutely.
right now there's a lot of police in the state of New Mexico who feel that the public is against them. Now, I don't think that's true down in this part of the state.
Sure,
but
but you're right.
True in other parts of the state where the police seem to be under tremendous public scrutiny. So we have to create a better environment for those police officers to work in, and we have to, as public entities, we have to support our police institutions and give them not only the resources they need, the personnel they need, but we have to give them the backing as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one thing to say you support the people, and I mean, you're asking these people to serve and protect in our community, and then you don't back them up or try to Monday morning quarterback them every time on every situation. Yeah, people aren't going to want to do that for a living. So I'm all for training and understanding and getting it right, but at the same time, um, how many times do we take things out of context based on a 30 seconds of a clip, and you don't see what happened before or after to understand why what you saw in 30 seconds happened the way it happened? And you can't. The court of public opinion isn't the place to decide people's fates. I'm sorry, it just isn't. And we've got a whole lot of that going on right now, and it unfortunately it's a negative impact on law enforcement. So yeah, you're right. We need to curtail that to even have a chance of getting qualified, good people to fill these positions.
I think that may be more the key than pay. Pay is certainly important, but I think having that type of support structure is probably as important for those officers. And I think we've done a pretty good job in southeast New Mexico with that issue, trying to support the police, the sheriff's offices, and our state police. I know that we have really appreciated the way that Lance Bateman and the officers here in southeast New Mexico have dealt with a lot of issues under a lot of pressure to do some things, and yet they tried to really keep things at bay and really work with the communities instead of taking some drastic measures that they were being forced to take.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that in southeast New Mexico, we've done a pretty good job of that.
Absolutely. I agree with you. We're a different world here sometimes than the rest of the state. I can see it every time I go up north. We're about out of time, but I do want to talk about one thing real quick before we go. With the marijuana bills and that the recreational marijuana, that's all going to be legalized here in a couple months. Municipalities across the state have been kind of trying to function and put together plans over the year. Is Santa Fe done with this issue, or are there going to be some guidelines coming from them, in this legislative session, saying, okay, I guess standardization a little bit. I think that's one of the problems we've been running into is now that recreational marijuana is coming, each city, each county, everyone's trying to figure out how to make the correct ordinances and things to do this. From what I'm hearing from our community leaders, county commissioners, mayor, city council, et cetera, are saying there's not a lot of guidance from Santa Fe on how to do this. Is that something legislature is going to get into, or is that not even on the radar at this point?
Mike, I don't think that is on the radar for legislative action.
Okay.
The way it was teed up in the special session where that bill passed
Mm-hmm.
was that it would be turned over to the regulation and licensing department to come up with regulatory parameters, and I think they've been trying to deal with those issues through the regulatory body ever since. And so I think the effort has been focused on the regulations, and maybe that will prove to be a mistake, but as it generally is, in my opinion. But
Gotcha.
That's where I think the issue lies right now.
Okay.
Now, I do believe probably at some point, because of the haste with which that bill was passed, we are called back into special session to deal with that one topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think at some point you're going to see some amendments to that legislation as those issues percolate to the top, and you see, well, wait, we didn't quite do this right, and we need to tweak this or that.
Gotcha.
I think you will see some in the future, but I don't think you'll see it in this 30-day session. I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
I think we gave the regulatory body until April of this year, March or April of this year, to come up with some regulations and things. And I think that's the problem that the counties and the cities are facing is that they haven't received that guidance, and the regulations are probably not coming out yet. But
Okay.
that would be my guess for this legislative session, that we probably don't see any cannabis type of actions, and I don't see any of that on the governor's
Plate or docket here.
at least what she's put out so far. One thing on her agenda of things that she wants to do. She wants to use bond money to buy and to acquire land in conservation easements, and that goes hand in hand with the federal government's 30 by 30 initiative. And I can tell you that our counties down here are very concerned about government acquiring more land and trying to take land out of the tax base and put land in the government's hands. And that's an interesting one. I think that'll probably receive some pushback, certainly from the legislators in this area. There's an interesting issue regarding the use of hydrogen, or the manufacture of hydrogen from natural gas, and what do you do with the carbon atoms that are extracted off of that process, and there'll be some interesting debates on that issue.
Okay.
I was pleased to see that the governor may give us a little bit of a gross receipts tax incentive by reducing the gross receipts tax by 0.25%. Maybe I wish it was higher, but at least there's a little effort in that regard to reduce that tax a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see what the majority says about that. But
Yeah.
I hope that anytime we can reduce taxes, I'm all in favor of that.
Absolutely. Well, we do appreciate you spending some time with us here. Safe travels up to Santa Fe. I'd love to maybe, I'll give you a call later or talk with you later, but maybe do a weekly check here or update as things are going here in the legislative session. I'll work with you and your schedule and see what kind of works best there. But if you're amenable to it, love to have some updates as the things progress here during the session.
Since it's so early in the morning and legislative time, things don't get rolling until at least 9 o'clock. It's quite possible that if you'd like, we could round up all the local legislators on a weekly basis and maybe phone in and
that'd be great. If I don't see how they feel about it, but yeah, I'd love to have them do that. I don't want to, if they're like, man, I want to sleep in an hour, then I let them do it.
Well, that's usually not on the agenda, but usually you can catch us with a little more free time earlier in the morning.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to talk to them and see if we can figure out which day we could do that. We'd just do it every week if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Do me a favor. Yeah. Kind of bounce it off them and see what kind of day of the week works best for you guys. And then from there, we'll kind of figure something out from there. How about that?
That works on this end.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for representing us here in Southeast New Mexico and fighting the good fight, even though some days it feels like you're fighting alone there.
So, some days I feel like a Washington Redskin. just getting beat up all the time.
Yeah, but we're going to take our benches every place. They're real nice.
Yeah, and I guess I have to say that now it's the Washington Football Club.
Till February 2nd. Yeah.
I go all the way back to when the Cowboys and the Washington Redskins had a real rivalry.
Yeah.
I was a younger kid, and oftentimes you came out on top of that battle. So anyway,
now they're just embarrassing. So
yeah, well,
February 2nd we'll have a new name at least, so we'll see how that goes. But
Yeah, we'll try to get used to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, sir. As always, appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again here real soon. Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
All right. Bye bye. All right, that was Representative Greg Nibert. Big thank you to him for spending some time with us today. And they're heading to Santa Fe, or actually, a lot of his counterparts are already there. He'll be heading a little later today.